The first time Junie Vale called me mommy, her mother was standing 3 feet away with a glass of water halfway to her mouth, and nobody in that kitchen moved for what felt like an hour. That came later, before the tower, before the driver who called me ma'am like it cost him nothing, before the marble floors that swallowed the sound of my own footsteps. I was a 29-year-old temp nanny standing in a pawn shop with my father's watch in my palm, trying to decide if I could still get anything for it the third time around. Same crack, he said. Same offer. I put it back in my pocket. Some mornings the answer to a hard question is just no, not yet, not this one. My name is Wren Calloway. I used to be a forensic accountant. That morning, I was 3 weeks behind on rent, 1 semester short of getting my sister through nursing school, and about to accept the one client assignment every nanny at my agency had already turned down. Subscribe to the channel, and let's get into it. Miss Holt didn't sugarcoat it when she called me in. The Vale account, she said, sliding the folder across her desk like it might bite. Otessa Vale. You know the name. Everyone knew the name. The Iron Widow of Vale Tower, the business papers called her. A woman who had taken a mid-sized logistics firm and turned it into a shipping and holdings empire before she was 35, who fired executives in 4 words and never raised her voice doing it, who had buried her bonded wife 2 years ago and hadn't been photographed smiling since. 3 nannies in 14 months. One lasted 9 days. Why me? I asked. Because you're the only one left who hasn't quit on me this quarter, Miss Holt said, which was not flattering, but it was honest, and I had learned to take honest wherever I found it. She told me the girl was 4. Difficult, the file said, though nobody had bothered to explain what that meant. She told me the pay, and I did the math in my head before she finished the sentence. 4 months of that number cleared the rest of my sister's tuition with room left for the watch. The real fix, not the pawn shop's fake one. I said yes before I let myself think too hard about it. Vale Tower rose out of the financial district like it had personally decided to be taller than the weather. The lobby alone had more marble than the church I grew up in. A driver named Desmond met me at the door, looked me up and down once, and said nothing, which somehow felt worse than an insult. The elevator climbed 40 floors of glass and money while my reflection tried to look like it belonged there. It didn't. Neither did I. Not yet. Junie Vale was sitting in the middle of the penthouse foyer when the doors opened, arms crossed, glaring at a housekeeper the way small dictators glare at cabinet ministers who have disappointed them. She won't eat the crusts, the housekeeper said to me, desperate, like I was already hired. She hasn't eaten anything since breakfast. I crouched down to Junie's height instead of talking over her, which apparently nobody in that apartment had thought to try. What's wrong with the crusts? They're sad, Junie said, like this was obvious. Sad how? They're the part nobody wants. Her chin wobbled, just barely, in a way that had nothing to do with bread. I sat all the way down on the marble, ruining a decent pair of tights. I like the crusts best, I told her. Best part of the sandwich. Everybody's wrong about that, and I don't know why. She studied me the way small children study things they're deciding whether to trust, total, unblinking, merciless. Then she picked up the crust and ate it. That was the whole audition, as far as I could tell. Nobody stunned, nobody clapping, just a 4-year-old deciding I was safe. But the housekeeper's eyebrows went up to her hairline, and later I found out that was the first food Junie had eaten in front of a stranger in 6 weeks. The second thing that happened that day happened almost by accident. A catering invoice was sitting open on the kitchen counter, and my eyes did the thing they always do. They landed on the numbers before I could stop them, the way some people can't help finishing a crossword left open on a train. Something in the totals didn't sit right. I picked it up without asking, ran the math twice in my head, and found it. A line item duplicated under 2 different vendor codes, $412 bled out twice for the same delivery. "This is wrong," I said to no one in particular, and held it up. That was when Otessa Vale walked in. I smelled her before I fully understood I was smelling anything at all. Iron and frostbitten pine, cold and clean and entirely unlike anything in that overheated kitchen, and my own scent must have done something in answer, because her gaze flicked to me and stayed there a half-second longer than the invoice warranted. She was taller than her photographs, dressed like she'd stepped out of a boardroom, because she had dark hair pulled back hard enough to look like armor. She took the invoice from my hand without asking, read it once, and looked at me like I'd rearranged the furniture in her head. "Who let the nanny do accounting?" she said. Not a question. Her voice had no heat in it and somehow still managed to land like one. "Force of habit," I said. "I used to do it professionally." "Used to. It's a long story. I have an elevator ride's worth of patience for long stories," she said, and something in her mouth almost moved, before it decided against it. "Try me." I didn't, not that day. But she hired me on the spot, doubled the number Miss Holt had quoted, and told Desmond to have my things brought up from wherever I'd been staying. Because Junie, she said, did better with someone in the house at night. I said yes again. I was getting good at saying yes to things that scared me. That night, I lay in a guest room bigger than my old apartment, listening to a 4-year-old 2 doors down negotiate with her stuffed rabbit about the terms of sleep, and I thought about my own mother's honey fig soap, the smell I still couldn't walk past a farmer's market without flinching at, and wondered what it meant that I'd already cataloged the way this house's owner smelled like winter, held very still. The wealth of that apartment did not announce itself. It just accumulated, quietly, in things I kept noticing. The thread count. The way Desmond deferred to a woman half his age without hesitation. The way the housekeeper, Mrs. Okafor, moved through the rooms like she'd raised children in them and lost some of them too. There was a locked door at the end of the East Hall that nobody explained, and I learned fast not to ask about. Mrs. Okafor filled in what she could over folded laundry. Her wife, she said, careful with the word, was named Marisol. Reyes was her family name. She passed 2 years ago this autumn. Complications. In childbirth, Junie came early, and Marisol did not. She smoothed a small shirt flat on the counter with more attention than the task required. Madame Vale has not cried where anyone could see it since the funeral. Sleeps 4 hours if she sleeps at all. Works the rest. And the room at the end of the hall was going to be a nursery for a second child. Mrs. Okafor didn't look up. Leave it be. I did. But I noticed things anyway, because noticing was the only skill I had left that still worked right. I noticed Otessa remembered, on the second day, that I'd skipped lunch and had a plate sent to whatever room I was in without a word about it. I noticed she asked Junie 4 questions about her day and listened to all 4 answers like they were board minutes. I noticed the particular way her jaw unclenched, fractionally, when Junie fell asleep against my shoulder during a storybook and she came to collect her and found she didn't actually want to. On the 9th day, reaching for the same book at the same time, our hands brushed over Junie's headboard, and neither of us moved for 1 full second too long. Her scent sharpened, flint under the frost, something almost like want, and mine, I would learn much later, had gone warm enough that she noticed it too. Sugar and fig blooming through a room that usually smelled like nothing at all. "You should go to bed," she said. Her voice had lost its edge. "You should too," I said, which was not something anyone at that company apparently said to her because she looked at me like I'd broken a law. She didn't answer. But 3 nights later, a courier delivered an invitation to the Vale Meridian Charity Gala, with my name typed on the card in the same careful hand as Otessa's own signature below it, and a note in her handwriting this time, 4 words. Junie asked for you. That wasn't strictly the reveal, but it was the door opening onto it, and I walked through without knowing what waited on the other side. The gala was the kind of event where the flowers alone cost more than my father's last hospital bill, and I stood at its edges in a dress Otessa's stylist had produced without asking my size, feeling like an imposter in someone else's fairy tale. Junie, allowed 1 hour past bedtime as a special exception, held my hand through the crowd like it was a rope over open water. That was where Camille Reyes found us. I knew her face from the file before I knew her name, Marisol's older sister, a seat on the Vale Meridian board that had come to her by marriage into the family long before Marisol died. And a smile so smooth it took me a full 10 seconds to register the venom under it. You must be the new one, Camille said, looking me over the way you'd appraise a piece of furniture you suspected was fake antique. Otessa does love a project. I'm not a project, I said. I'm the nanny. Of course you are. Her eyes went to Junie, softened for exactly as long as it took Junie to notice, then hardened again the moment the child looked away. Junie, sweetheart, tell your Aunt Camille, does she read to you every night? Does she stay? She always stays, Junie said, fierce, like it was a fact worth defending. How lovely. Camille's gaze came back to me, and for one unguarded second I saw something underneath the sweetness that made the hair on my arms stand up. Not jealousy exactly. Calculation. Marisol would have wanted someone steady around her daughter. It's such a shame she never got the chance to choose. She left before I could answer, trailing perfume so aggressively floral it made my eyes water, and it was only later, watching her corner Otessa by the bar with a folder under her arm and a smile that didn't reach past her teeth, that I understood the visit had never been about me at all. Otessa found me by the terrace doors 20 minutes later, with her jaw set like poured concrete. What did she say to you? She asked. Not a request. A demand dressed as one. That Marisol never got to choose someone steady. I watched the words land somewhere behind Otessa's eyes and do damage. What's in the folder, Otessa? Nothing that concerns you. The mask was back, seamless, the one I'd seen in photographs and not once in the house. I need to speak with counsel. Desmond will take you and Junie home. She didn't come back that night, or the 2 after it, and when she did, she moved through the apartment like a woman braced for a blow she couldn't see coming yet. It came on a Tuesday, the kind of ordinary that makes disasters worse for not warning you first. A storm had knocked out half the grid downtown, and the tower's backup generators kicked on with a groan that plunged 3 floors into flickering half-dark before settling. I was in the kitchen when I realized Junie wasn't where I'd left her. I searched the playroom, the library, the hallway with the locked door, my pulse climbing with every empty room, calling her name in a voice I fought to keep level for her sake and mine. Otessa came off the elevator mid-search, still in her coat, and read the panic on my face before I said a word. Where? She said. I don't know. I turned around for 2 minutes. We found her together, finally, in the one place neither of us had checked first, behind the drapes in the nursery that never was, the locked door standing open because the storm had tripped something in the building's old wiring, sitting cross-legged on the dusty floor with a photograph clutched to her chest, crying without making a sound. The particular silent crying of a child who has learned that loud grief gets punished. I wanted to see her, Junie said when Otessa knelt and gathered her up. I wanted to see Mama's room. Otessa held her daughter and looked over Junie's head entirely undone for the first time since I'd known her, and I understood, watching her, that this was the door I'd been meant to walk through all along. Not the ballroom, not the folder. This. I knelt beside them both without thinking about it and said the only thing I had. I always leave a light on, I told Junie, smoothing her hair back. Always, so the people I love can find their way back, even in the dark. I'll leave one on for you every night, I promise. You'll never have to look for it alone. Junie's crying slowed. Otessa's eyes, over her daughter's head, found mine and held there long enough that something passed between us that neither of us had words for yet. Not lust, not exactly. Something closer to recognition. The specific relief of being witnessed by someone who wasn't asking you to be less than what you were. Thank you, Otessa said, low, rough at the edges. 2 words that cost her more than the gala's flowers. You don't have to thank me for loving her. I wasn't thanking you for that. She didn't elaborate. She didn't have to. We put Junie to bed together that night, an unspoken division of labor that felt older than 9 days of knowing each other. Otessa reading, me refilling the water glass, both of us lingering in the doorway after the light went off, close enough that her scent, iron and frost-bitten pine, mixed with mine in the dim hall in a way that made my chest ache with something I didn't have a name for yet. Ask me a real question, I said, when the silence stretched too long to be comfortable. You've had one since the gala, she considered it, the way she considered everything, weighing cost before commitment. Why did you leave accounting? I told her, finally, all of it. My father's cancer, the debt it left, the whistleblower complaint I'd filed against a firm partner skimming client escrow accounts, the way filing it had been the right thing and the career-ending thing in the same motion, because the partner had friends and I had a resignation letter and a blacklist I never saw, but felt everywhere I applied afterward. You lost everything for telling the truth, Otessa said. I lost a job. I kept the truth. I shrugged, though it cost more than the gesture suggested. Some trades are worth it, even when they're expensive. Something shifted in her face, decisions settling into place behind her eyes. Camille's folder, she said, was an audit request. She's claiming irregularities in the family trust, Junie's trust, technically, the one Marisol set up before she died. Camille wants oversight reassigned. To her. That's not about money, I said slowly. That's about Junie. I know what it's about. Otessa's voice went to iron. I will not lose her. You won't, I said, and meant it with a certainty I had no right to yet, and reached for her hand in the dark hallway, the way you reach for a ledge you're not sure will hold. She let me. Her hand was cold, and it warmed under mine anyway, and for one long moment neither of us moved, both of us aware of exactly how much weight that small contact was carrying. Tell me to stop, she said quietly, and I will. Don't stop, I said, and she didn't. Not until Junie's door clicked and a small, imperious voice announced that she needed water again. Please. And we broke apart laughing under our breath, like teenagers caught somewhere we weren't supposed to be. And the whole terrible week felt, briefly, survivable. It didn't stay survivable. 3 days later, the article ran. Vale heiress's finances under scrutiny. Sources claim missing millions from family trust. The headline read, and under it, smaller, uglier, questions raised over CEO's fitness following hire of unvetted companion for minor daughter. There was a photograph of me at the gala, cropped to make the space between Otessa and me look intimate and improper instead of what it was. There was a quote, unnamed source close to the family, calling me a woman with a documented history of workplace misconduct, my whistleblower complaint, twisted backward until it read like the crime instead of the confession. Camille had filed for emergency guardianship review that same morning. A social worker showed up at the tower by 10, polite and apologetic, and entirely unmovable, with a court order requiring a home evaluation and, worse, requiring me to produce documentation clearing my name before I could remain in a caregiving role pending review. Otessa's mask came down so fast and so completely I barely recognized her. She spent the day in calls with lawyers, voice flat, eyes flatter, and when she finally found me that evening in the kitchen, she looked at me like a woman calculating collateral damage. "You should take some time away from the apartment," she said. "Until this settles. You're sending me away. I'm protecting Junie. By taking away the one thing she stopped screaming for at night." My voice cracked, and I hated it. "Otessa, this is exactly what Camille wants. She wants you scared and small and cutting away anything that makes you happy. Because a woman like that has never once loved anyone who wasn't useful to her. You don't understand what she's capable of. Then let me help you prove what I'm capable of, instead of hiding me like something to be ashamed of." I was shaking by the end of it, and Otessa's face, for a terrible second, showed nothing at all, the coldest I had ever seen her, colder than the first day, and it broke something in me clean down the middle. She didn't send me away in the end, but she didn't reach for me either, not that night, and I lay in the guest room with the hallway light burning outside my door like a promise I wasn't sure either of us could keep anymore. And somewhere down the hall I heard, very faintly, a 4-year-old crying for her mommy and not knowing which one she meant. I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table at 2 a.m. with Otessa's laptop, given to me weeks ago for scheduling Junie's appointments, and the trust documents Camille's lawyers had filed as exhibits, and I did the only thing I had ever been good at in my life. I followed the numbers. It took 6 hours and 41 minutes, and I counted every one of them. Because counting was the only thing keeping my hands from shaking too badly to type. The trust's quarterly disbursements didn't match the bank confirmations attached as supporting exhibits. Small differences at first, 400 here, 900 there. Easy to miss if you weren't the kind of person who'd once lost her whole career for noticing exactly this kind of thing. I traced the pattern back 18 months through 3 shell accounts and 1 offshore intermediary with Camille Reyes's late husband's name still attached as a dormant signatory, and found $2.3 million that had never gone anywhere near Junie Vale at all. At 6 a.m, I put the folder on the table in front of Otessa, who hadn't slept either, and said, "She's been stealing from her own niece for over a year." The audit request wasn't about protecting Junie. It was about covering the trail before anyone looked too closely, and I looked. Otessa read it in silence, page by page, and when she finished her hands were perfectly still, which frightened me more than shaking would have. "I am going to end her," she said, very quietly. "You're going to hand this to the trust's independent counsel and the district attorney," I said, "and let the law do what the law is for. If you go after her yourself, with your own hands, in the state you're in right now, she wins anyway, because then it's your name in the next headline instead of hers." I put my hand over hers on the table. "I know you have it in you to burn her down to nothing. I need you to want the version where Junie still has a mother left standing at the end of it." Something in her face cracked open, and she nodded once, like a woman setting down a weapon she'd been carrying too long. The board meeting where it came apart was held 2 weeks later in a glass room 40 floors above the street, with Camille Reyes seated at the head of the table in a suit the color of old blood, entirely unaware that the folder in front of the trust's outside counsel had my handwriting all through its footnotes. She smiled through the first 20 minutes, right up until the counsel read the account numbers aloud, and her husband's dormant signature, and the dates that lined up exactly with 3 of Junie's missed disbursements for physical therapy Marisol had specified before she died. I watched the smile die on her face in real time, watched her reach, too late, for the same smooth denial that had worked on every room she'd ever walked into. "This is a fabrication," Camille said, "cobbled together by some unvetted nanny with a grudge and a criminal complaint on her record." "The complaint," I said, standing, because somebody had to, and Otessa's hands were shaking with the effort of not being the one to say it, was against a partner skimming escrow funds from grieving families. I reported it because it was true. Everything in that folder is true too. You can check every number yourself. I did twice. The room went very quiet. Desmond, at the far end of the table, looked at me the way you look at someone you have decided to stop underestimating. "She's protecting her meal ticket," Camille tried, quieter now, the sweetness curdling. "She's protecting my daughter," Otessa said, and her voice, when it finally came, was the calmest thing in the room, which made it worse for Camille than any shouting could have. "Which is more than you ever did in 14 months of quietly bleeding her trust dry while I buried your sister." She stood. "You're removed from this board, effective immediately, and the Trust's counsel has already forwarded this file to the district attorney's office. I would get a lawyer of your own, Camille. A good one. You're going to need it." Security escorted Camille Reyes out of Vale Tower 40 minutes later, past a lobby full of the same employees who had spent 2 weeks whispering about the unvetted companion, all of them watching in silence as the sneering woman who'd started every rumor was walked out in handcuffs instead. Nobody looked at me like an imposter anymore. A few of them, on the way past, actually looked ashamed. Otessa found me on the terrace afterward, the city spread out gold and ordinary below us, and for the first time in 2 weeks her shoulders weren't carrying the whole weight of the world alone. "I owe you everything," she said. "You don't owe me anything. I did what I'm good at. You did more than that." She stepped closer, close enough that iron and frost-bitten pine wrapped fully around me, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating off her skin under all that careful control. I have spent 2 years telling myself that loving anyone again was a debt I couldn't survive paying twice. You walked into my kitchen and started correcting my catering invoices, and I have not had one uncomplicated thought since. That's the least romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. I'm told I need practice. Her hand found my jaw, careful, deliberate, the same restraint I'd watched her exercise in 100 smaller moments, finally bending towards something else. "Ask me with your words, Ren, so there's no version of this where you doubt I meant it. Kiss me," I said. "I'm asking." She did, slow and certain, and it tasted like the end of a held breath. And when we finally broke apart, Junie's voice came sailing down the hallway behind us, delighted and entirely unsurprised, announcing to Mrs. Okafor at top volume that Mommy was kissing Mommy, and could they please have cake now to celebrate. Neither of us corrected her. I don't think either of us wanted to. The bond came 3 months later, on a night with no audience and no folders and no ghosts standing between us, in a bedroom that finally smelled like both of us at once. Otessa's mouth found the curve of my throat and paused there, waiting. "Tell me to stop," she murmured. "And I will. Every time." "Always. I've never wanted anything less," I said, and felt her smile against my skin before the bite came, sharp and then warm, and the bond snapped into place like a held door finally allowed to close. Her scent and mine tangling into something new that belonged to neither of us alone anymore. The proposal came on Junie's 5th birthday, in front of a garden full of people who had once been strangers, and were somehow impossibly family now, Desmond gruff and misty-eyed at the back, Mrs. Okafor dabbing her face with a dish towel she'd forgotten to put down, Junie herself standing between us in a yellow dress, holding the small velvet box because Otessa had insisted, solemnly, that this was a family decision and Junie should be the one to open it. "Will you marry my mommy?" Junie asked me, entirely too pleased with herself, holding the ring up like a trophy. "Only if you'll be there when I say yes," I told her. And she was. Hanging off my arm through the whole thing, announcing to the assembled garden that she had personally arranged the entire event. We married that autumn under the same sky Marisol's family had once stood beneath, and I wore my father's watch on my wrist through the whole ceremony, the crack gone, the hands finally keeping true time again, quietly repaired months earlier by a woman who had noticed. Without ever mentioning it, exactly what I couldn't afford to fix myself. Camille Reyes pled guilty that same season to fraud and breach of fiduciary duty and would not see daylight outside a courtroom for a long while yet. The trust was restored, doubled, and renamed for Marisol, whose memory Otessa finally kept the way grief is supposed to be kept, not locked behind a door, but open, visited, loved out loud. A year on, the nursery at the end of the East Hall isn't locked anymore. It has new curtains and a crib we're slowly filling with hand-me-downs and hope, and a framed drawing on the wall that Junie made the week I moved in. 3 stick figures holding hands under a lopsided sun, labeled in a 4-year-old's careful crayon scrawl, "Mommy, Mommy, Me." Some mornings I still wake before either of them, in the gray edge of light before the city fully remembers itself, and I lie there listening to my wife breathe and my daughter's small feet already thundering down the hallway toward our door, and I think about a woman standing in a pawn shop with a cracked watch in her hand, certain that nobody was coming to fix anything for her. She was wrong. Being seen was never about being beautiful or easy or convenient. It was only ever about someone finally staying long enough to notice what was true. The end. If a story about a lonely little girl handing her heart to the exact right stranger got you somewhere soft tonight, subscribe to the channel so the next one finds you too. I'd love to know. What's the moment you'd have known Otessa was worth trusting? The catering invoice, the storm, or the hallway light? Tell me in the comments. Until next time, keep a light on for whoever's still finding their way home, and I'll see you back here soon with another story worth staying up for.